Well, we're glad you're watching Morning Express. That's business at this hour. And as we promised you at the beginning of the show, the Form 1 selection does indeed begin today. Over 800,000 candidates at their KCPE examinations last year. So they will be knowing in a few days to come where they will be going to school, at least for some of them. A majority and quite a huge number, which we'll be discussing just now, will miss slots. And the biggest question is about this particular system of Form 1 selection. How does it work? That is what we're delving into this morning with Dr. John Mugo, who's an education expert, joining me in studio. And remember, you can call in. Our phone numbers will be on your screen. You can be part of this discussion with your question or comment. Daktari, good morning.
Morning to
Happy
you,
New Year.
Happy New Year.
I'm still telling all my guests this January, Happy New Year, up until we get into next month, yeah?
That is quite justified.
It's justified, right?
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
It's never too late. So the selection exercise begins today.
Yes. Right.
And of course, I think the best place to begin would be an understanding of how this process works. So if you were to break it down for us, I was reading some articles and we'll of course begin with the national, extra county, county special, integrated and district. Sounds gibberish and quite complicated for most. If you were to break it down for ordinary Mwananchi, how is this going to be working out?
First, thank you, Sophie. The first thing to understand is how the system is organized.
Right.
That we have what we can call a unitary primary school system, that we don't have any classification of primary schools apart from the private public that exists. So we have more than 800,000 candidates whose results were announced, and who will be joining Form 1 now this January. So they are moving now into a clustered secondary school system. And we know that we have 78 national schools. Then we have what are called county schools. What used to be provincial schools are now referred to as county schools. Yeah. And then there are other smaller schools that are not at the level of county schools, which used to be called district schools. I'm not very sure of the term used now. Yeah. But you have those schools which range all the way from schools that are a little bit more established to other schools that are day schools. We know that there has been really a massive expansion of secondary school over the last 3 years, that so many primary schools have started a wing, which is now a secondary school within the same compound. So the cluster or the constellation of secondary school ranges all the way from the Alliance High School up there to that small school, which is maybe just 2 classes in the compound of a primary school. Right. So the decisions to be made is we have these children from private and public schools. Right. First of all, competing for the 78 schools nationally. And of course, the fairest means to use is marks that each candidate got. But then we must understand that Kenya is highly inequitable. Yes. So we have, when you look at counties that performed poorest, for instance, like Mandera and Garissa, the fact is that when we had the announcement, in some counties, the number 1 candidate had maybe just around 406 marks. While in other counties like Kiambu or Kirinyaga, which were at the top, in Nairobi, you'll find that if you are to list the candidates who had over 400 marks, you'd get thousands of them. And so there is what is called a quota system, so that children who are in places that are poorer, in arid areas and other places, really are not disadvantaged. Right, they also get a chance. They also get a chance to attend the best schools. Okay. And for sure we know that when these students come to the national schools, even with lower marks, they are able to compete because some conditions that they went through in their primary schools were not as good. Yeah. But the students themselves were good. So there is a lot of balancing act in this selection. Yeah. First, considering the county that this student comes from, considering the marks. Now, there is another equity dimension. We know that children attending private schools are actually now in the range of around 15%. So around 12 to 15% of the candidates that we are talking about of last year came from private schools.
Right.
But private schools are also not a unitary constituent. There are low-cost private schools and there are high-cost private schools.
Right.
And when we hear of private schools, sometimes we tend to imagine that those are the rich. But if you go to even where we are in Nairobi, to the urban informal settlements, places like Mathare, like Kibera, like Korogosho and other places, we get very small schools, very squeezed space, very many children.
Right.
Under even bad conditions. They don't have as good facility as a public school. And they work under constrained means. First, the public schools are not enough in some of these slums.
Right.
So parents are forced to make a choice of wanting the best for their children. And the best in this case is usually just at these low-cost private schools or what are called community schools. So parents make choices to take children to these low-cost private schools.
Yeah.
So when the selection is happening today, it will consider whether a child came from a private school or a public school. What may be unfortunate is that private schools are treated the same.
Okay.
And so there won't be differentiation between that child who attended a low-cost private school that is even charged less than the indirect cost of a public school, because one thing that we must understand is that public school is not cheap.
Public school is not cheap.
Public school is not cheap.
But there's free primary education, so it's not quite free.
There is free primary education, but there are two types of costs. First is what the taxpayer is putting into the public school.
Kitty, yeah.
And what evidence has shown is that if you take an average of how much it costs to educate a child in a private school in Kenya, considering as an average of the low cost and the high cost private school, then take the average cost of educating a child in a public school, the amount of money that goes into educating that child, from the teacher to the books to everything that the government and the parents jointly put in, that it is actually more costly to educate a child in a public school than a private school.
Okay.
So again, the equity of costing must be understood from a bigger picture.
Yeah.
That as taxpayers, we are spending a lot of money in the public system. And what we have seen from evidence also is that there is a big difference between quality offered in the private school and the quality offered in the public school.
Yeah, because you have more numbers in public schools.
Yeah, there are more numbers. We know that there is less accountability of teachers. When you look at evidence that exists on how many hours does a teacher spend teaching in a private school and a public school, there is nearly a 2-hour difference every day, that the teacher in a private school teaches more, up to around 2 hours per day, than a teacher in the public school. So there are all these differences in accountability, in managing the resources that are within, such that even that small, low-cost private school that really has no money end up offering higher quality of education than the neighboring private public school, which has a lot of resources.
All right.
So this equity model that the government is using, I can say is justified, but again also is aggravating inequalities.
How do you say, because the biggest concern now, and what we've seen, those who have disagreed with the guidelines that were released, is exactly that, the equity. Can we ever achieve that we are saying, as we get into this enrolling process, admission, that at the end of the day it's going to be equal for all, despite where you find yourself falling?
It is a very delicate balance, and I don't believe it's equal.
Yeah.
What
are the inequalities?
The inequalities in it is that there are places like take for instance Kirinyaga. A poor parent in Kirinyaga, which was county number 1, will have a child who was even in a public school having maybe, let's say, 410 marks. But because there were so many children with, let's say, even 425 and above, this child who has 410 marks will end up probably in a county school, secondary school within that county, which is not as good, where maybe even chances of passing 4 years after to go to the university are very minimal.
Okay.
Now compare that with another county, the same poor parent in a public school, where these two parents never did much. They just took their children to school. To a public school, and were educated.
Right.
So you'll get that in another county B. This child got 295 or 310 marks, 100 marks lower.
Yes.
And will end up in a better school, and thus having better chances.
So that's one of the inequalities.
That is one of the inequalities.
Yeah.
The second dimension of inequality is a private public. Now, not all parents are taking their children to private schools because they are rich.
Yes.
There are parents who are determined to see the better and the best for their children. So this parent in Kibera, who made a decision because they want the best for their child to take their child to the next door small private school. Will be punished.
How?
Because the child in Olympic or the next public primary school, both are poor. Both parents are poor.
Yes.
Our neighbors in Kibera, one wanted to invest more. For their child, and so helping the government, because had this child gone to a public school, the government would have spent. This other parent is lax, doesn't care. Their child go to Olympic or to Kibera primary school. They end up in a better school than that child of this parent who made a better decision for their child. And so it is difficult, because I don't know how one would be able to gauge family income for you to gauge whether this one is rich or this one is poor. The general fact which is used, or the general principle, is that people who have more money also have more chances, have more networks, have more chances.
All right. Let's talk to Prudence before we proceed with the discussion from Nakuru. Prudence, good morning. Hello.
Hello.
Good morning. Thank you for calling. Do you have a question or a comment?
I had a question.
Yes, go ahead, Prudence.
My child got 199 marks. And I wanted some encouragement.
You wanted? Prudence, would you please repeat that? We've lost her. I didn't get quite what she said, but she mentioned about her marks. But you've mentioned two things. So the issue of where you're from and the marks, you could get higher marks, but if you're from a county or location where everybody then performed very well, someone who might not have performed very well, but from a county which was, a region which was disadvantaged, or in trying to find this equitable balance, then we'll get a better position or that national school position. What are the other inequalities before we move on?
Yeah, the other inequality I was mentioning is between parents who want to invest more for their children and being punished for it because their children are in private schools, and parents who don't care, who have not shown responsibility, and thus go take their children to
although some do care,
public schools.
It's not just that they cannot afford.
I'm just creating this scenario.
Okay.
So you get that the private school, the low cost private schools are treated the same as the high cost private schools in deciding in deciding entry to the national school. But then the other inequality, which we can call systemic because is in the system, that we have schools that are called national schools, which get more money and are funded highly. We have schools that are called county, which are funded a little bit more. And we have small schools that require a lot of funding, but are the ones unfortunately funded least. So the whole structuring of schools as national, as county, is actually in itself aggravating inequalities. The ideal situation would be where schools that have less facilities are funded more.
Let me hold you there before we continue. Hold that thought. Sean from Nairobi is online. Good morning, Sean.
Hello.
How are you? Good morning. Thank you for calling, Sean.
Good.
Please reduce the volume on your television and proceed with your question or comment. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Sean, go ahead.
And he got 302 marks. And I want to encourage him.
Sorry?
How do I do that?
You want to encourage him.
How do I do that? I want to encourage him, and I don't know how to do it.
How many marks did he get? You said 302. Okay.
302.
Okay. Thank you, Sean, for calling in. So Sean says he wants to
encourage this child who got 302 marks. Now, what I would say generally, Sophie, is that the value placed on our examination is actually overrated. And what parents need to understand and what they need to tell their children is that the fact that you got 300 or even 100 marks does not spell out doom for you for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
Because when you look at where you and I are, we are not there because of the marks that we got during primary school.
True.
It may have driven us, it may have determined, because we maybe got to better schools, but it was not the end. We have many people who went to, who got a lot of marks, but because they lacked other things that are critical for success in life, then there was no balance in their success. And so this child who got 302 marks, it depends, because you see our examination measures only one aspect of us, which is cognitive. The exam did not tell us whether this child who has 302 marks has another talent, which will actually determine their future. The exam does not tell us about the character of this person who has 302 marks. And we know that character is actually the ultimate end of education. And character is what drives one even in career and all that. So this person who has 302 marks can be having a lot and maybe having A's in other areas that were not tested by KCPE.
Correct.
And so what is critical for a parent is to keep on identifying what is it that this child of mine is gifted at, and trying to look for spaces for that also to be expressed. Because we are living in a country where we are all kind of having a stampede into a very narrow white collar employment.
That you all think it's the same, you know, careers, pilot, doctor, that's, what you want to aspire to. And if you don't pass, then you're also not gonna, be a success in future.
If all these 800,000 children were to all head into being employed, Kenya does not have that kind of space. But we know that out of the 800,000, there are some who will be doctors, there are some who will have this, but there are those also others who will be entrepreneurs, and all of them will end up in some place. So the KCPE for me is not a good measure. The best measure would be, and we had the cabinet secretary alluding to it, that it will continue increasingly being expanded to also measure other areas which are critical for life. When you look at Kenya, and if you are to be told to name the 100 most successful people, it won't be all people who got A's in KCPE
who went to the best of the best schools.
There would be even people who are labeled as foolish, labeled as won't make it in life, and they end up as the most successful Kenyans because of other things.
All right, so off of that, I'm sure Sean has captured a few things there that would be used to encourage the person, him or her, who got 302 marks. Because bottom line, as you said, very important, is really that is not the end. It's what now they believe of themselves and the other opportunities they could explore that will determine where they will go. But we're talking about, and I want to move us to get us moving from that as we wind up on the same, the issue of the inequalities. You were finishing up on just the basics of the private lower paying private schools, the ones who charge lower fees, and those that will have higher fees for the same.
And the point I wanted us to understand very clearly is how our education system, especially the secondary school system, is aggravating inequalities within it. That schools that have more facilities are funded more. Schools that have less facilities are funded less. The national schools which are causing this stampede are few. They can't accommodate all the children. They are focusing on only one aspect of the children, which is the academic.
Right.
And they are funded more.
So in essence, with that you're also saying, and what you mentioned earlier, the education system in itself is flawed in what it focuses on and misses in the whole process.
Yes, and when we look at just about 2 years ago, we had the task force that had been appointed to advise on reforming the education system. And one of the proposals was really to have an equity model of funding of secondary school, rather than this what I can call a hangover from the colonial system.
Right.
That we used to have schools for the whites, schools for the Asians, and schools for the blacks. Now, when you look at the system today, it's actually the same thing under a different name. National schools are what used to be elite schools and so on, which were schools for the whites. The county schools would be the equivalent of what used to be schools for the Asians. And these small schools, the village schools and all that, are actually condemned, and they used to be the schools for the African.
Okay.
And so this is the system that we ought to have demolished. And when we are classifying schools, reclassify them so that they take children not based just on the marks they got from this very lopsided examination, to having streams of some are focusing on technical, others are focusing on the academic, others will be maybe science academies, others will be sports academies, and so on.
All right, Colomba from Tana River is joining us now. Good morning, Colomba. Kindly reduce the volume on your television so that we can communicate, Colomba. Colomba, can you hear me? Kindly reduce the volume on your television so that we can hear each other. Do we still have... Okay. As you do that, we're going to take Peter. Peter, good morning. Peter? Peter, do we still have you?
Hello, I can't hear you.
I can hear you. Good morning. Hello.
Good morning.
Thank you for calling. Do you have a question or a comment?
Good morning.
Yes, go ahead with your question or comment. Hello. Hello. All right, Peter doesn't seem to be hearing me, but
I just have a comment.
Yes, go ahead, Peter.
A comment. Hello?
Yes, go ahead with your comment.
Hello?
All right, Peter is not hearing me, but we're talking about just bringing this down to the level of understanding that the discrepancies need to be sorted out. You're talking about high schools, national schools, and what really is happening there, the issues that are plaguing that system.
Yeah, the very bare fact is that someone going to a national school will have more chances of passing KCSE than a person going to the other schools. And when you look at how KCSE will be released in another 1.5 months or so, or 1 month, and you will see that nearly all the 78 national schools will be among the top 100
best performing.
And then of course we have some very good county schools that will also edge in. So the probability of one in a national school making it to the university is much higher than that in the county school, and the probability of one in a county school making it is much higher than one in a smaller village school.
And we saw the 27 schools that were elevated to the national school status. Has that transformation already happened, and what does it take when we hear the ministry talking about these schools are now going to be national schools? What does that exactly mean? Do they add more infrastructure? What changes about these schools that now they qualify to be in that category?
There is a standard that is there for national school.
Right.
For instance, there is a facility standard, a national school must have a certain level, certain ratio of teacher to students. It must have certain facilities like laboratories and so on. So it must meet some minimum. So the first thing that happens when a school is elevated is an audit. And then there is funding for that school to meet that standard.
Right.
So if it is building of a new laboratory or building of new dormitories and so on. The other thing is the school size. We know that increasingly the ministry has tried to have the national schools having around 6 streams.
Right.
And so that the population of students getting to national schools is also expanded. So this school is audited, and there is more investment so that it can meet that standard. And of course, these schools are followed more. The principle that goes to head a national school is well scrutinized because they must have a good track record. Because the whole essence of the national school is to make this a center of excellence, a school that is admired by others. And we know previously, if a school never matched this, then it would be demoted. And others were so ideally the ideal of the national school is that it should be the top school in performance. It should be the top school in everything. It should be the best that is admired.
All right, Maina from Nakuru, good morning. Hi Maina, thank you for calling. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, Maina from Nakuru. I have a comment.
Yes, Maina, go ahead.
I think our system of people forward in our platform. Because the kids are not well sharpened, they are not able to express themselves well, and so much of academics.
Your line is not very clear, Maina. Maina, would you please repeat what you just said? Your line is not very clear. We can barely get what you're saying. Maina, good morning. Your line is not very clear. I'll urge you to still, if you can, send a message on 22155. We're not getting you very clearly, but thank you for taking the time to call us. We appreciate. So we're going to, I stopped you when you're talking about that transformation. So these schools have not completed that transformation yet because they said it's next year that they'll be able to admit the 27 that were elevated to the national level.
Yes, but the elevation and the continued improvement is actually a continuous process.
Okay.
Rather
so
than it's not a one-off thing.
Okay.
So when you look at schools, especially the ones that were newly elevated, you find that some of them have met maybe at 60% of the standards, others are at 80% of the standards, others are at 90%. But what we know is that there'll be increasing effort on a continued basis throughout the year to ensure that this school is revamped, it meets those standards by the end of the year.
All right. So out of the 800,000 candidates that started the exams last year, do we have an indication of how many would be absorbed? Because that's also an issue of concern. You have such a huge number that has come out. It's now being offloaded. National schools, the best of the best, do not have much capacity, very few in number. But do we know where we stand with those numbers? How many will actually be taken into secondary school?
We'll be expecting an announcement from the cabinet secretary this morning, hopefully, giving the status of how many. But there has been initial information that around 17,000 may be admitted into the national schools. We don't know how many will be admitted in county schools and others in the other smaller schools. What we know is that over 200,000 of those that set for the examination may not get any space anywhere, even in private schools.
Wow. because
from the records of last year, the transition rate from primary to secondary is still around 73-74%, and which means around 25% of those that set for the examination may not get any space anywhere.
It's about 200,000.
About 200,000. And which is a big number. When you ask yourself, where will they end up? Because we have a policy of no repetition. And also, when students repeat, it means that the government spends more. Because this is a person who was supposed to spend money for only 1 year or for 8 years of primary. Now the person is going to spend 9 years. If they repeat, and we know that some of them are forced to repeat even to class 7. So they end up being in primary school for 10 years instead of 8. Then we are spending money for 2 years more educating a child in the same grade. So grade repetition is what is called wastage, because it is actually leading to, first of all, wastage of potential and wastage of resources. So we don't know. What we had being promised is that they'll be encouraged to join the village polytechnics. But of course, even when we know that Kenya requires middle-level skills, it requires technical skills to develop and for us to achieve Vision 2030. But selling village polytechnics is now the thing for the future and all that. When we are saying that you go to this village polytechnic because you can't get any space in secondary school, then we don't see these technical schools making headway. Because the ideal situation, and if I heard the last caller, he mentioned something about our education being too academic. This is the reality we are facing. That we are saying, in the whole of the training of 80 years of primary school, there is no mention of technical education. Now, once you have failed the examination,
that's when you start hearing
you are told technical education is very good.
It's the way to go.
It's the way to go. Then we can't be serious about it. We ought to, by the time the child is reaching class 4, we already know that this child is gifted in science, is gifted in arts, is gifted in technical things, so that already we start nurturing that and exposing them more and having them interact with teachers of technical education still at that level, so that by the time they are reaching class 8, we know that this child has already developed interest, has developed what we call a disposition for technical education. And what will determine whether they go for technical education at secondary school level or academic is not because they'll have passed or failed, but because this talent will have been identified and nurtured, and they will be led to that. And then later on, if they want to continue to university, they can move all the way up to a technical university. And if they want also to cross over to the academic line, there is also these crossover chances that one can move from one channel to another.
All right. Dr. Hari, our time is up, but we've touched on quite a number of issues, and very good. We had the caller earlier talking about what to tell, a candidate who scored 302 marks and perhaps are very discouraged or are not sure they will get, to what they wanted, the school they wanted to go to. But when you look at this conversation from the public schools point of view, their biggest fight is in quality, ensuring that with the numbers, they're giving quality to these students. With the private schools, they're fighting more for the equity, that they're not disadvantaged when placed neck and neck with the public schools. When you look at government, there's a whole free primary education, trying to ensure everybody is having access to education, but at the same time, funding, which is tricky, and you've tried to capture that, what happens to those who are not absorbed into these schools. And then there's the biggest concern of the system and how it works, and whether it really is working to, at the end of the day, bring out people that are going to be useful in society, or will it be people who are saying nataka kazi or serikali patia mimi kitu kidogo, So how do you sum this up? What's the next steps that we need to see in terms of the stakeholders involved in this sector? What is very urgent to be worked on to make sure that these conversations shift to see progress in the system?
What is very critical at the moment is what we can call the relevance of our education. As you say, the curriculum is the first thing to look at. What are our children learning at every level? Are our graduates meeting the demand of skills in the job market? That is the ultimate. So we should actually use a reverse logic, looking at who is that graduate who, or a graduate of a secondary school or a technical education and so on, who is required in the job market today, who are expected to create jobs as opposed to seek jobs. And then come backwards. How must universities adjust themselves to produce that? how must the secondary schools adjust themselves to take that person to the technical university or to the university and so on. So reviewing our curriculum, I would put it as the topmost priority. The second thing is addressing quality. We know that right now we are just talking about KCPE, but we know that the children who failed this examination, it could have been predicted 7 years ago when they were in class 2. So how do we ensure that there is increasing improvement of quality of education at all levels, so that these children, there is no learning gap. The moment they enter class 1, they are learning what they are supposed to learn all the way up to class 8, so that once they exit class 8, it's not about having crammed and passed an examination. It's about having accumulated knowledge that will drive you towards lifelong learning. The third issue is about equity. Equity cannot be addressed by the way children are taken to secondary schools. Equity is a bigger issue. We have parts of this country like East Pokot, where more than 60% of children are not going to school. We have parts of this country where you go to a whole division or a district where no child passes. How can this equity be addressed, not just at the examination level, but in the resourcing level and so on? We have a flat rate funding of a free primary education and free secondary education. We know that in this country there are children learning under trees, there are children learning without teachers, while in other schools we have actually more teachers than are required because they are nearer to a town and so on. How can we ensure an equitable distribution of teachers, even as we complain of teacher shortage? How can we ensure that every school and every child attending school in this country is treated equally and equitably?
Excellent. Very well put. Dr. John Mugo, we appreciate your time. Education expert with us in studio this morning. Ahead of the Form 1 selection that begins today, it is a sector very important and key to Kenya's development, but also that is plagued by quite a number of challenges. But outlined by Dr. John Mugo is some of those ways that need to be explored to ensure that things continue to work so that this system works and produces the best of the best.